Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything. I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self-love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. And this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about how other people can help us be our best selves. But before we get started, a reminder, this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat any physical or mental illness. We always recommend that you see a licensed health professional accordingly. And I will say we're going to be talking about invisible labor, mental loads, those kinds of things. I highly encourage everyone, if you're feeling these feelings, to seek a mental health professional, because I know that was a game changer for me and being able to advocate for myself in some of these areas. But I want to introduce our guest and the author of the new book, Our Home, which is a real family oriented, intended for children to bring up issues in a fun and relatable manner, to initiate conversation, to foster bonding and unity, and kind of set the stage for children to be successful in helping with some of that burden in the home. And it was written by Lori Sugarman-Li, who has had careers spanning the gamut from marketing and communications to being a dedicated and devoted full-time caretaker of her family, community, and children's charities worldwide. And now is a coach, speaker, and author based on that experience. She is dedicated to fostering meaningful conversations with families, encouraging them to contemplate how they care for one another and their shared space. And Lori and her husband and two sons are Canadian born and lives steps from Lake Michigan in Chicago. And before we get started, one of the questions that I asked Lori before she came on the show is that we would also discuss how to approach this if you are a single parent or you have two parents working in the household. When we talk about families, just because we both happen to have, my children were raised in an environment where my husband stayed home for over a decade as well. But now we're both a two-parent working household. Even though I work at home and have a lot more flexibility, it is not lost on me that those situations are very different. And I have so much respect and like an unbelievable amount of, I don't know how you do it, for parents who are in that single parent household. So I definitely want to talk about some of the ways that we can support people in those situations. But welcome so much to the show, Lori. I'm excited that you're here.
I'm thrilled to be with you. Thanks so much, Stacy.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how this kind of topic and book came up for you?
Yeah, thank you. So I was thriving in a paid career for 15 years. I was a marketing strategy director. And with the birth of my first child, the flexibility that I was looking for in that professional career wasn't on offer. And so I decided to pivot my skills and my contributions to the economy of care, right? Full time commitment to family and community. And to my surprise, I thrived in that as well. And it was really interesting to me to go deeper in commitments there. And our family moved internationally twice. We were Canadian, then we moved to London, and then we found ourselves living in Chicago. And each time we move, we need to renew our family guiding documents like wills and insurance and whatnot. So because we moved to Chicago without any kind of a safety net or family support or anything, it was just our little nuclear unit. My husband said to me, you know what? When we get all the insurance settled, let's try for disability insurance for you because God forbid anything happens to you. He said I would have to take a leave and head the family. That was how we prioritized it. And so we went through all the rigmarole of the disability insurance, all the forms, all the health exams, everything, only for me to be told by the insurance agent, well, we don't value homemakers that high. And I was rejected. And he said to me, ma'am, you don't fall on our algorithm because you don't receive a salary. So ostensibly, there's no loss if something happens to you. And it was such a bubble bursting moment for me, having really felt so nourished by the contributions that I had made in the economy of care to realize that at a societal level, this work, in fact, is not valued. And it lit me on fire to begin an exploration and a mission to make this work more visible, and more valued, and at its foundation, more equitably shared. So I was looking at the amazing people who were working in this environment, who were starting conversations about equity in government policy and equity in social policy and corporate policy. And I thought, oh, it's so meaningful and I'd love to be a part of that. But at the time, as a quote, stay at home mom, I didn't necessarily have the platform to join in to that work. And I thought, what can I do? How can I be a part of this change? And in looking at my platform and looking at my credibility, I felt very connected to children at that stage of life. And I thought, let me try to talk to children. Let me try to break this cycle for future generations. And so my children's book mission was born.
I love that. And I definitely raised my children to believe that all tasks and all people in the household are important. I think being raised in a house with a stay-at-home dad, there were a lot of differences that my children became very aware of. Things like not being welcomed at mom meetup groups or different kinds of
Hmm.
things. And then also typically child would see a mom make dinner, and
Hmm.
people would assume that I made dinner, but
Hmm.
I was working, so my husband would make dinner. And so
Hmm.
my children became knowledgeable and adept at correcting people in some of these assumptions. And it totally is a societal belief. It is a societal structure that is set up long before any of us were alive in terms of the patriarchy and how women were valued and literally bought and sold into marriage. And that was the value of a woman, was to take care of a home and to raise children. And in today's society, it is very different. We don't have the same homemaker structure. And if we have the privilege of someone staying home, they are fulfilling work that is something that the rest of the family doesn't have to do. And I know that was part of the discussion that my husband and I had, was like, well, isn't it great that if you're home, it's not just how much money we're saving, it's also the time that we get to spend then on the nights and weekends as a family, because we're not having to scrub toilets and dust. That can be done on different days or whatever. So I think that the idea of trying to instill that in children and to let the children see what equity looks like is the best hope that we have, because it is impossible to teach old dogs new tricks in today's
Hmm.
modern society, right? Like, yes, we can have these conversations, but it's, if that's what was ingrained in us, then sometimes we don't even realize some of the things that we're doing are playing into that. And so the idea of, I don't know, I have a lot of hope in the next generations, that I've seen
Yes.
how much, especially their use of social media, enables them to empower one another. And I think the more stories that they share in those places as they grow up, if they've been exposed to alternative ideas of what society could value or what society could do, is a huge opportunity. And I know in your book, you're speaking directly to younger children, but there's a trajectory of when those younger children are exposed to these concepts at that age, it's just normalized. It's not, it doesn't feel like they're fighting against some sort of larger, bigger system. It's just,
Exactly.
this is what we do in our house because
Yep.
it's fair.
Yep. Exactly. First of all, you just said like 100 amazing things. I'm writing notes here rapidly so I can address all of them. But you said it exactly. This is a problem at a societal level, at a structural level. But the beauty of it is that the solution is at the family level and is with the reflection that we do and is with the conversations that we have and the agreements and the promises that we make to one another. And the power is all within the family unit to impact change here and to have a trickle up to society. And you're so right. Yes, ideally, we're going to start having these conversations about family values and looking at our family as a team when children are young. And that's why I wanted to introduce a book for children. But you said this is a start where you are opportunity. There are probably many listeners right now that have children who are older than the sort of 5 to 8 target for my book. But this is a conversation that can happen at any level. And you know your family best. But ideally, it happens by talking about what's important to you. Families can be whatever they want to be. but it's a matter of sitting down and reflecting on those values and those desires and understanding everybody's needs and capabilities. We're all wired so differently. We all thrive in different kinds of environments. The idea that we can connect, understand the choreography of how our family works and what we want to achieve and how we can support each other through that. From the expression of our values comes the offshoots, which are our standards. And that becomes our North Star that guides us through all of this work. And the work of home and family, it has to be done, right? And so it's all about the lens that we put in on it and the way that we approach it as a team.
I totally agree. And I think the ideas of playing into people's strengths is a really important one that I want to talk about because I get a lot of questions about that too. But before we get into more of kind of some of the details, I would love to just baseline when we're talking about invisible labor
Mhm.
or what can also be called like mental load. And I think that they're slightly different, but definitely overlap, right? Like they're the Venn diagram of two bubbles.
Mhm.
Can we talk about what that actually means? What are we referring
Yeah.
to?
Yeah. So much of this work of care and work of home and family really happens in the shadows, right? It happens when children are little. It happens when they're napping or when they're at school or daycare or when they're in a different room playing. Typically, we know that moms globally women carry 75% of the weight of this work. And so they're constantly multitasking. And so a lot of it is unseen. Another example of where it's unseen is if your family happens to have a wonderful person come from outside of the family to help with some of this work. And so the family is doing their thing, and then this wonderful helper is silently and magically doing all of the work of the home. And so it doesn't get seen and it doesn't get appropriately valued. And so the stuff that happens that we don't see is the invisible work. The mental load refers to the cognitive part of this work and the emotional part of this work. And so a lot of the work of home and family is executional. That may be visible, that may be invisible. The mental load refers to all that leads to us being able to execute. So all of the planning, all of the remembering, everything that we file away in our brain about our family's needs and preferences and schedules and all of the emotional stuff that we carry, the worrying, right? The middle of the night stuff, the supportive through tricky situation stuff. And we know that women as well carry the bulk, the majority of the mental and the emotional. We often see struck family structures where men will come in and participate in the executional stage. And of course, it's wonderful when you have a partner that says, I'm here. Let me help. Tell me what to do. Give me all the things. Like I have shown up to be a part of this, right? But the concept of helping still really implies that the woman is the manager, the woman is the owner, and that, the part. And I will say, let's jump in and say right now, this is a very gendered conversation. And the reason it's so gendered is, first of all, because of the societal definitions and structures, right, that we've grown up on. But also, the majority of the research that we have that we draw sort of data and conclusions from have studied male female relationships. We do have a little bit of research on same sex partners. And unsurprisingly, gender is not as much of a complicator in those relationships. And we do see actually less of this kind of struggle. And so it'll be interesting as we learn more about same sex partnerships, how those conversations can guide different sex partnerships to have these sort of conversations. But anyhow, the invisible and the mental load are the heaviest in a way because they're the hardest to share. Someone can come into the room and you can say, "Yes, I need you to take out the garbage. Yes, I need you to unload the dishwasher. Yes." But what happens is that all the planning and preparation for those tasks to be available for execution still rest, again, typically with the woman or the mother who is still seen as the household manager. So the opportunity that we have with household systems is to shift tasks in their entirety. So package them up with a red ribbon from conception through planning, through execution to someone who owns the whole deal, such that the other family members can release all aspects of that. And then what we find actually is that there's a reduction in stress, a reduction in duplication, a reduction in resentment, a reduction in nagging, and actually, in the end, an overall reduction in the amount of time that's spent on household tasks because they become so much more efficiently done.
I love this ideal utopia of making all of these improvements. And I will say, like, this is something that I really struggle with. I am in part responsible for that because when I was younger, when I was a younger mother, I was very much not healed in my need to control everything. And so therefore I thought, well, if my kids or my husband did something, they weren't doing it right, quote unquote,
Mhm.
right. They weren't doing it the way I would want it done.
Yeah.
And I do think that if I could give wisdom to my past self and to anybody in those stages of life, it would definitely be it does not matter. Like let other people
Exactly.
learn how to
Right.
do it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful, especially when we're talking about kids, and this is part of parenting too. It's like, on one hand, we want to protect them from work, right? And things that take them away from the joy of play or their focus on study and their focus on whatever their path is to college or their professional life or whatever is happening next. We want to protect them from that. And so parents, again, mothers tend to take on the majority of the work, but parenting really is so much more holistic than that. And we're preparing them to be independents, right? Like, yeah, we want them to get into a great college if that's what they want, but we also want them to know how to make that life for themselves and how to feed themselves before a big exam and or how to like make their apartment look nice for when they invite over a romantic partner or whatever it is that like resonates with them. And then we want to prepare them to be strong, solid partners for whatever type of partnership that they're going to get involved in. And so there isn't like a line in the sand where we know, oh, this is the time we start teaching our kids about household tasks and the elements of care or whatever. It's a start where you are. And for all your listeners, like wherever you are today, this is a huge opportunity just to say, just to acknowledge maybe like, oh, maybe we miss doing this as a family. Like, this really is interesting as a concept to me. I'm going to sit my partner down or my kids down or whatever and say, what do you think about this? Like, it really landed strong with me and it made me reflect on some opportunities, I think, for our family to run a lot more smoothly and stick these sticky points that get in the way of our daily flow or that cause us stress. Like, would you be open to exploring looking at a system like this for our family? And it doesn't have to be a system. That sounds like a really fancy word for something that's really just about a family agreement and a commitment to one another to provide care and to all contribute to that care.
I want to share an example because I think we're talking higher level. So let me give a personal example. When my children were younger, one of the things I did that I can point to and say, I'm really glad I did it, and it has made a huge difference in my quality of life now, is bringing the kids into the kitchen with me. And
Mhm.
I often hear from people who have younger kids, and they're like, but they make such a mess, and then they
Mhm.
pour too much salt in the thing, and then this and this.
Mhm.
Part of that is just learning how to cook.
That's
And
it.
not only is it creating like memories and connection with
Yes.
you as a young child in the kitchen, but it is also empowering them to learn a skill so that when they're older, they can cook.
That's it.
Because now I have teenagers ranging from 13 to 18, and each one of them cook a meal at one day of the week.
That's
And
fabulous.
while it was a lot of work when they were younger to bring them into the kitchen and to deal with all the mess and all the things that they learned how to cook. So now, as a
Mhm.
14-year-old, I can tell my son, we're having burgers for dinner. That's his favorite
Yeah.
thing to cook.
Yeah.
And he knows exactly what he needs to do. And for my 18-year-old son, I can say, can you just make dinner? And he knows he can go to the freezer and he can pull out meat and he can do this. Like he can independently create those things. And that is the mental load that we're talking about. Like
That's right.
there's a mental load and me having to put the groceries in the house for them to begin with. There's a mental load for me having to create the meal plan. But if I can then hand over the reins and say, now you all know that Wednesdays are Wesley's day to cook and
Mhm,
Fridays are Finn's days to cook. And we do
mhm.
that on purpose, right? Like we have days of the week for everybody, and I don't have to worry about that. Then it releases the mental load from me. And there also needs to be accountability with the children that I don't need to remind them, as you said, nag them at 5 o'clock on those days, at 6 o'clock on those days. Why haven't you started dinner yet? Blah, blah, blah. Because we've set them up for success
That's it.
and
That is it.
say, these are the expectations. Wednesday's your day. I send out a text every Sunday. I'm like, here's the meal plan for the week. And that's it. And it's my responsibility to make sure that we have the food on the list. I don't cook a meal during the week. That is my participation in that process. And I have intentionally structured that way because if I needed to do the shopping, create the meal plan, and cook the meals, I would be resentful. I would feel
Mhm.
overwhelmed. I would all of
Exactly.
those things that you're talking about. So there are a lot of areas in our life where we're not killing it with this, but this is an area where I feel really good about, and I can point to both the past when I set children up for success and
Mhm.
then seeing it implemented now, and the quality of life difference that it makes for us is night and day.
Well, this is an example of a superb system. And I don't know if you've ever had the chance to chat with your kids about it, but I bet you they feel a tremendous sense of pride in how you've not only entrusted them with this, but how they've built their muscle to deliver this for their family. And it's so interesting that you bring up food because the first decade of my paid career, I worked with a food company, Kraft Foods, and we did a ton of research on the benefits of involving children in the process of food procurement, preparation, and the execution of cooking. And what we see in the research is that children who are involved with food become more interested in trying new foods and exploring and more likely to participate in eating what they've prepared. And so food is such a fabulous space. And the other thing you mentioned is and the bonding element of it, right? So your kids are now have now built the muscles to where they're doing it independently, but the way that you got them there is through this partnership that you invited them into, right? And all these stages of again trusting them with things that are age appropriate and safe. I see now they have little plastic knives that are safe for children to practice chopping with. And there's all these tools that can facilitate bringing kids into this space. And it's a brilliant example. And because food is something that you're passionate about as a family, it makes so much sense to you. For a different family, you may invite kids into like yard work as a space, for example, or something that I've invited my kids in to participate a lot in is laundry. We have heaps of laundry, and most of it is my kids. They both play travel soccer. There's turf bits, grass stains, and dirt on everything. And so when they have a game, they want their uniform to look smart. So I show them what's involved in that. And they take responsibility for making sure that I own the laundry card, but they need to say to me, I need my practice kit for these days. I need my game kit for these days. Also, my older son loves going to music concerts and collecting concert t-shirts. When we get spaghetti sauce on one of those t-shirts, like he wants to know how to deal with that. And so he comes into the
I
laundry room
want
with
to
me.
know how to deal.
Right.
Not the
And it's
laundry queen.
it's really important for them to understand like look, here's the thing I'll say. The word chore is the wrong word for this work. It emanates like downer energy. It's refers to work that is repetitive and tedious and difficult and unappealing. And it's not fair to the work of care. That's what we call it, really. And I think there's an opportunity to change that energy because when we walk around the house going, oh my God, the laundry, like, ugh, like it just piles up and it's like endless, right? Well, laundry is like, let's let our laundry be just like morally neutral, right? Like, but could we change? Could we just shift an inch to the right to look at this work as fundamentally acts of gratitude for all that we have. That's what it is, right? We're caring for each other, we're caring for our space, we're caring for things we've invested in, like our home or our car or whatever. Those concert t-shirts are not inexpensive, right? We want to look after them and we do it not because it's annoying and tedious. And we do it because we're grateful that we have this concert. We have the memory of the night and the music and so it's really all about going back to your initial thing. It's really all about setting kids up with work that is at its core safe and age appropriate, but that matches their skills, matches their passions, as you beautifully illustrated with the food example, but also like sometimes matches like a problem to solve. So my older son was a very boisterous, enthusiastic eater. There were lots of crumbs as a result. So I taught him how to use the vacuum, right? He made the crumbs, he sucked them up. And I have a son who has really great executive functioning skills in terms of organizing. So he's the grocery guy. He unloads, he reorganizes the pantry. So it's like first in, first out, right? And systematized. That works for him. Sometimes you have a child who thrives better in partnership. And so we talked about that with laundry and yard work and cooking and stuff. And so this is at its core not about pawning off work onto kids. It's about empowering them. It's about looping them into important things. Kids want to feel trusted. They want to feel empowered. And you said this also beautifully, like it's an opportunity for us to release and let them do it in their own way where there's safety around that, right? They may do things differently than we do. Guess what? They sometimes do it better. And the opportunity is to let them explore it as a task that they feel true ownership of. And then they'll report back to you and say, look what I did. I did this. And family bonding, it's so interesting. We so often refer to the work of the home, these chores, as we call them, as the stuff that we have to do to get to the stuff that we want to do. So do your chores and then you can go out. Or like we have to clean up on Sunday morning and then we can go to lunch out or to the playground or to whatever it is. But I have to tell you, when I look back at time with my dad growing up, I lost him 10 years ago. The memories that come flooding back to me first are of our partnerships like around the home. We were partners. My dad had a beautiful neurodivergence where he needed support in completion of big tasks. And I was that person for him. And I knew it and I loved it. And we had so much fun together. Loved the work of the home, but he needed to be targeted to stuff. And so we worked together on cleaning his office. And I learned a ton about household management and bills and bank statements and all that through that. We worked together on taking the lawn furniture in and out of the attic, depending on the season it was, and putting it back. And we swept the garage together at the end of every season, whatever it was. And we always had the radio on. He was listening to a baseball game or whatever it was and smoking a cigar and who knows what, right? Back in the 80s. But this was our bonding time. And this was the stuff of the creation of connection between us and of building trust between us and of me feeling empowered and involved in important things. And so it wasn't just stuff to check off a list so that we could then get to the family bonding stuff. This is at the heart of it too. And that's a big opportunity for families to recognize.
I actually got teary-eyed when you were talking about the beautiful neurodivergence of your father because my partner, my children's father, is neurodivergent. And there are so many times when we call it 80%ing, right? Like he'll be focused on a task. Unloading the dishwasher is the most obvious one. Because
Yeah.
when you walk into the kitchen and he's not there, but the dishwasher is still open and
Right.
mostly empty, right? Like, and I think we've all come to know that's because he literally got distracted with something else
Hmm.
that he needed to do.
Yeah.
And we either pitch in and do it. Oftentimes I do things. And sometimes I'm like, no, I want you to come back and do this. I do not want
Right.
this responsibility myself.
Hmm.
And I love the idea that my children could someday consider the role that they've played in that in such a beautiful way as you described. I'm like really losing it. Because I think that it's an entirely different feeling than this, like, burden that you described that people need to have, and, like, I want my kids to think about their time at our home as being loved and being supported and being included, and you were talking about, like, the pride that kids have in accomplishing something, like, there is no parent has ever, like, not enjoyed the moment that your kids are proud of something. I can tell my kids that I'm proud of them all day long, but the minute that they're proud of themselves is like, that is what I want to do as a parent is
Yes.
to, like, see my kid be proud of themselves, knowing that they have their own validation for the work that they've done, the accomplishment that they've made, and that they independently can accomplish something and feel good about it. And I think part of the reason that I'm, like, actually dripping tears is because I'm thinking about it's never too late, right? Like, we talked
Yes.
about my biological children grew up from a very young age doing all these things, but we've had a child that we're adopting in our home for 3.5
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and they have a learning disorder, so it's very difficult for them specifically to figure out measurements, and cooking was very hard, and in the beginning, because they grew up on cereal and ramen, it
Yeah.
was nearly impossible for them to participate in some of the kitchen stuff, and they felt
Mhm.
overwhelmed
Mhm.
comparing themselves to their siblings who were able to read a recipe, complete it, and do their own thing, and I'll never forget that after, like, teaching them for, I don't know, several months, they decided that they wanted to make crepes. They really love
Oh,
crepes,
wow.
and we got a crepe pan, we didn't have one,
Yeah.
and my youngest and them, they were in the kitchen for, like, I don't know, an hour, figuring out how to make crepes, practicing in the crepe plan, just doing their own thing, exploring and being creative, and then when they brought me a plate of a crepe, and it was, like, a beautiful crepe, and they'd made a blueberry sauce themselves,
Oh my
and it
gosh.
was like, I like, buckets, right? Like,
For
just
sure.
buckets of pride in
Yeah.
the fact that they had come all the way through and done that, and I could have, at many times, been like, "You know what? This is just easier for me to do. I'll just whatever," but because we stuck with it and encouraged them to do this, they figured out how to do it in the kitchen. Much easier that my all my kids do their own laundry at this point, except my youngest, and
Mhm.
there are different things around the house that they all do, and we do call some things chores, and
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna rethink how we do that, but I think there is responsibility in the house that someone take out the trash and the recycle,
Mhm.
and someone bring it up from the curb, but I think part of what I love about what you were saying about neurodivergence is I live in a house with neurodivergent people,
Yes.
and there are certain tasks that are better for them than
Exactly.
other
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Unloading the dishwasher is something that my youngest, who has autism and ADHD, has a very difficult time doing. He gets very frustrated because if there's like a
Mhm.
fleck of food left on the plate, he cannot process that
Yeah.
that plate could still be clean, and then, like, the whole sink ends up full of clean dishes, and, like,
Mhm.
it's a whole thing, and so
Yeah.
instead, the better job for him is taking out the trash because it is a singular thing, it does
Mhm.
not require a lot of executive function, and we instead of having to tell him when to do it, the rule in our house is now just take out the trash every night. Even if the trash isn't full, that's okay. Like, we go through a couple of extra bags, it's recycled plastic anyway. Just
Right.
take out the trash every night.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that sets him up for success. He has a timer on the Alexa. She tells us every night at a certain time, take out the trash. And I think if you can build in these kinds of things, it can make a huge difference in not just like empowering your children, but in your mental load of having to
Yes.
carry like the invisible labor that I felt of needing to tell someone to take out the trash all the time and like the
Yep.
overwhelm of on Thursday night, did the trash get taken out? I need to go check the curb. Like all that stuff. Being able to let go of that definitely has improved my health, my mental health and overall well-being for sure.
That's brilliant. And it's only now, with all that we have learned about neurodiversity, that I can look back and understand where my dad was at, right? And how he thrived and where he struggled. We know so much more about this now. And you said you live in a house with neurodiversity. The reality is, like, we all do, right? This is like a continuum where we all fall in a different space. And the more we can talk about it and the more we can share, and the fact that your partner can say, yeah, I usually get to 80% on the dishwasher and then like game over, right? And the fact that your family can cherish that and like even laugh about it, right? And support him through it. And the fact that you've created this safe space where your child can build up the confidence to make something as like fabulously gorgeous as a crepe, right? With a blueberry coulis. This just goes to the environment of nurturing and nourishing that you've created there. And it all stems from family communication and family honesty and just sharing where we're at and what we need and how we thrive. I would probably label myself as pretty type A. I like things just so organized, tucked away, put away. My 13-year-old does not thrive in an environment like that. And so for me to go into his room and his space where he has like so much nostalgia everywhere. He loves to be surrounded by the things that are meaningful to him that allow him to reminisce on moments from like years ago. And he's got Legos that he made 10 years ago that were a source of pride, and notes from people and trophies and whatever. For me to walk into his space and say, no, no, we got to put it all away because that's my standard for my space isn't fair to him. And so what's important is that we understand what type of environment he feels safe and thrives in and create a standard for his best self, right? And support him to reaching that kind of standard. And the more we know about what we each need and what we each feel safe in. And by the way, when you're talking about like a communal space, like a kitchen or a living room, you need to have more discussion so that you can meet in the middle and blend your requirements. But the more we can talk about this as a family, and sometimes we may feel like, I'm not going to call my family together to have a 20-minute conversation about taking out the trash. But I can tell you, and it seems as though you've done this. Once you do it, you likely don't ever have to do it again, right? Because when you reflect on this as a family, what is going to be most efficient for us? What is going to reduce the nagging, the stress, the forgetting, or the duplication, or whatever it is? Then you get into this flow and you'll see like it just moves, right? Your family just gets through all these things. And as you said, the stress that it caused at one point, you're able to release.
I think that it surprises me when I talk about something that we do called family meetings that other families don't do it.
Hmm.
And I think that it is what you call like this agreement or family flow or different kinds of things that we're doing. We as a family, though we tease the kids that it's not a democracy, we want everybody to feel safe in our home. And that means that if someone is like adamantly opposed that they do not want to do a specific task in the house, like I do not want to do dishes. I grew up my whole life having to do the dishes every single night. And it's like, it triggers me to do the
Yeah.
dishes. So I only do it on Father's Day and my husband the
That's
dishes.
hilarious. I love
Um,
that.
and my family knows that, right? Like, I do not hide the fact that the dishes are not for me.
Yeah.
And there are other things in the house that other people don't want to do. And sometimes when my kids are really super bad, they're responsible for the cat litter because I know that is like the last thing on their list. But for the majority of the time, we go by something that we've established in a family meeting. And as you said, it once it's established, it stays that way. But then when things change, like if someone is on vacation, like
Yes.
sometimes my
Mhm.
older son went away this summer with a friend for a couple of weeks. And so the tasks that he did needed to be rerouted. And when my oldest got a job and he wasn't here for dinner in those evenings, then the responsibility of that he used to do needed to be picked up by other people. And instead of
Yes.
just dictating what that is, we got together as a family and we're like, okay, Cole's going to be working every single night except Mondays and Saturdays. So that means we're going to have to shift who makes dinner when. And Then can you pick up 2 nights a week instead of 1 night a week? Well, yeah, does that mean that I don't have to do the dishes that night? Yes, I'll do the
Mhm.
he
Mm. Yeah.
my middle son's like, I would make dinner every single night if it meant that he didn't have to do the dishes. So, I think being able to have those conversations is really important, and in those conversations, sometimes fairness comes up because
Yes.
I do have a child that has learning and processing disorders who hasn't
Mhm.
been in our family to learn the same kind of things as long. And I also have our youngest child who is, by definition, very different skill wise than my 18-year-old, but also has autism and ADHD, and he cannot do the same things that my 18-year-old can do. And
Right.
so part of that conversation is like, well, it's not fair that this person doesn't have to do this or this person doesn't have to do that. Okay, I hear you. And that person has a different task also of feeding the dogs every day. Or this person has the job of taking out the trash. That's why they don't have to do this. And then I feel like the whole room, like the air that's taken out of resentment and frustration and all these things that people might be feeling when they have that space to have those discussions, it can be like oh, I see. The parents aren't just being arbitrary and they're not just favoring someone else other than me. Like we're having these conversations. And so whether it's an actual document, I've seen a lot of families have like charts or whatever. I just think that it's really important that the conversation is being had in a way where everybody understands. And sometimes that conversation is like, I have a busy week at work this week,
Mhm.
so
Yes.
I'm not going to be able to do the things that I normally do. Can you please help me with X, Y, or Z? And that again is making a huge difference in them seeing I can ask for their help and they're empowered to help me be successful. They
Mhm.
feel a little bit responsible and ownership for the positive that we have. If I have a busy week, then that means like, hey, they helped mom be successful in work. Right? Like all of these kinds of things come from that open communication and being able to have these conversations. And I think when we keep these in because I know that's how it was for me before, right? And I would just like grind my teeth and be mad that I had to do all these things and like nobody's
Yeah.
helping me. But I
Right.
wasn't asking for help and I wasn't talking to anybody about it.
Right. Right. You just said so many important things. And the first concept that you raised, which is really critically needs to be at the heart of all of this, is the difference between equity and equality. And this is not a 50-50 game or a divide the pie equally game, right? It's about understanding how each individual in your family can be a successful contributor and how your family dance, right, can flow with everyone in tune, in tandem. And it's not necessarily about everybody carrying the exact same load. It's about every single person being optimized for what they are able to do, for what they love to do, right? And you made such a good point before that this agreement is organic. It can shift and change like at any time as needed, as long as you come together and regroup on it. And you also said something really interesting, which is, yeah, not all tasks are equal, right? So some of these more daily grind, really time specific tasks that your children are more likely more independent now when it comes to like getting themselves up and out and whatever. But with younger children, right, the responsibility of that morning rush and all that goes along with it is like a very different you can mark that as one task. You can also mark mowing the lawn as one task, right? Those two things are really not created equal. You're mowing the lawn, you're outside, you have like a beer on the patio that you take a sip of every time you pass, you've got headphones on, you're listening to music. Very different, right? So it's really understanding like the weight of it. And again, the magic is going to be different for every family. And what's also critically important is not just a division of labor, but ensuring that every family member also has an equal amount of rest and an equal amount of things that bring them joy, because that's what's going to get your battery charged to be able to contribute on all the other things. And then the third thing that you said, which is so important, and I do this as well, and I love to hear that you do, is when my kids do contribute in a meaningful way, it's not about me saying, "Oh, thank you for helping me." Because again, that implies it's my responsibility and your, but the opportunity is to acknowledge the impact that their contribution had in a really like colorful, intangible way. Like when you folded the laundry, you spent probably half an hour on that. And because I didn't have to think about doing that, do you want to know what I accomplished in that half an hour? Let me tell you. Let me share with you what I was able to achieve because you stepped in. And that is so meaningful, whether it's contributing to your paid work or if you were able to rest and like read a few pages of your favorite book, whatever it was, the contributor understanding like the tangible impact of what they did is often so meaningful. And one last thing I wanted to suggest in the framework of everything that you just said was what's really helpful in getting kids connected and having a stake in work is for them to understand the why behind the work. So when you're having conversations with your kids to get them engaged, there's a big difference between me saying to my 13-year-old, you need to change your sheets today, and me saying to him, buddy, I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's there's a correlation between sleeping on a clean pillowcase and having clear skin, which I know is important to you. So, first of all, I wanted to like let you know that probably weekly we should be changing your sheet. That I'm happy to help you to do that together because that pesky fitted sheet is like such a nuisance, right? But also, let me show you how to keep them clean. So you pull them off, meet me in the laundry room. I'm going to show you what we do, right? I'll show you the temperature. I'll show you like where the spray is, whatever. And then I'll show you where the extra sheets are. We can grab them and make your bed with something clean and fresh. It's going to feel so good when you hop into bed. And you're just going to know that like looking after your skin is like, this is a part of that. And then they're like, bought in, right, to having the clean sheets and whatever it is. The other example I sometimes use is with the car. If you've got little kids and you're doing a lot of carpooling and running around, there's probably bits of granola bars and banana peels and wrappers and like all kinds of good stuff in the car because you're racing and you're eating on the go and whatever. Telling your kids like, "Oh my god, this car is such a mess," right? That's one way of approaching it. But a different way might be, hey guys, I don't know if you realize this, but our car is actually worth this many dollars. We'll probably sell it or trade it in or whatever in 5 years. If we keep it well, if we maintain it, it will hold its value to this degree. If we're really messy with it, we don't look after it, it'll probably be worth slightly less. So it's up to us, right? But imagine if we keep our car like tidy and we all took responsibility for taking out our granola bar wrappers and our banana peels. Imagine if we had $100 more when we sell our car. What would we do with that $100 as a family? And that becomes like your North Star, right? And you can keep coming back to it like as like the thing that you're gonna go out to this restaurant or buy whatever game console or whatever it is when you work together to that end. And so it just gives them the context for understanding why these things are important, not that it's just like a check on a list of something that feels annoying.
It reminded me as you were talking about specifically laundry and fitted sheets. I tease the family that I learned these things in mom school. So I want to share this joke with everyone because I've been like pondering how to like I've actually thought about like writing a book and like a fictional fun book about mom school. And so when they can't figure out how to put a pillow in a pillowcase,
Right.
or when they have a splinter, or when they get a hole in their pants and they need me to sew it
Mhm.
up. There are
Mhm.
certain tasks that like those are mom knows how to do that. And I'm sure in your house there are certain things that you are the person that like is the best at certain things. And oftentimes my kids are like, "How do you learn how to do this? Like I don't understand." because no matter how many times I show them, like, they're just not getting it, right? That it's just not clicking yet, or they're not old enough, or they don't have the executive skills, or like whatever it is. And the joke in our house is that I went to mom's school to learn those things. And I think what it also does is highlights this really there isn't a mom school, right? Like, and we've done the whole gamut of like, as I'm taking a splinter out of someone's foot, I talk about how, my friend Sally at mom's school, she was really better at this than me. And she taught me all the tricks because it helps me like keep their mind off of something else, right? But they know that it's not true. And
Right.
part of what I think this does is highlight to them that everybody is capable of doing the things that mom is doing,
Yes.
that I didn't go
Yes.
to a special school to do it,
Right.
that, like,
Right.
we can all learn how to do these things, and while there are some things that, like, I love that they come to me about, and even when I'm 80 years old and they come to me and they want me to help them do whatever, like, I will do it for them because that's my mom heart doing,
That's your
like,
heart.
certain
That's your
things
heart.
for my kids.
Mhm.
But some of the things are like, "You are totally capable of doing this.
Right. Right.
I really didn't learn it in mom school,
Yeah.
right? Like, let me teach you how to do it."
Yeah.
And so I think that if we as family members can support one another in whatever way works in your family. I know a lot of people do like songs and they dance with their kids while they're doing certain things. For me, it's sarcasm. Like, everybody has their own way of connecting with their children, but I think that your book talks about making certain things fun and together and all these kinds of things, and I think when I first read it, I was like, "I love this idea of, like, your little kids feeling like, 'Yes, I can do that.'" And I remember when my kids were toddlers, they had the little, like, push popper thing because it looks like a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
They wanna do what you're doing, right? Like, my
Yeah.
kids loved to, like, clean at that young age.
Mhm.
And the problem is that oftentimes those things aren't nurtured in a way that actually relates it back to the house. And so then it they get disconnected from it and it takes them a while to come back around. But you can encourage them and tell them how proud you are of them for doing whatever. Like, even if they're pushing the broom around and they're just moving dirt from one place
Yes.
to another, like,
100%.
but they're learning, right? They're
Yes.
contributing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and you raised something a minute ago that was really poignant, which is it reflects the fact that the caregiving role has been embedded into the motherhood role, such that when we do reach the stage where we have to release parts of it and let our children thrive slash stumble and fumble on their own, it feels like a bit of a loss for us, right? Because we have been so ingrained to believe that this is a labor of our love, right? And because of the way that society paints it for us with the motherhood instinct and mother knows best and baby wants mama and all these things that supposedly we are better wired to offer, so deeply ingrained in how we define motherhood that when we do release some of it, it feels like we're releasing part of our motherhood role. In fact, we are not. And what's really important to start to talk about is that motherhood is one role. Caregiving is a beautiful but separate role. And when we release elements of the caregiving role to and empower our children to do them independently, our motherhood of them remains beautiful and whole and intact. And in fact, it probably even swells in seeing them thrive in that way.
So beautifully said and wholeheartedly agree. I think as you were talking, it really stood out to me all of the things that I was thinking about my partner, my husband, who did that would have fallen under that like motherhood umbrella for
Mhm.
so many people. And how, as the caregiver, he didn't do it the way that I did it, but he did it
Mhm.
in a way that gave such care and love to our
Yes.
children. And
Yes.
in our relationship, because we communicated about who was best at certain things. And I think that's another thing, right? Is that really needing to be in partnership with your partner if you have one and having conversations about like, I am not going to do the dishes, period.
Mhm.
What do you need to do that it feels fair to you that I am never going to do the
Mhm.
dishes?
Yeah,
And having those conversations, but also having conversations about like, how can I help you feel connected to the children in a loving sort of way? Like, I want my partner to also feel like he has the same kind of his relationship is going to look different, but I want him to have that same kind of connection. And whether you're in partnership with a heteronormative relationship or you're in same-sex relationship or you're a single parent and you can also enact help from other people in your community, whether it's your parents or your best friend or
mhm.
whatever,
Yep,
right? Like it is so important that your children see the different roles that people can play because we all
that's
have
right.
different strengths, we all have
Yep.
different personalities, we all have different needs, and we can fulfill that for our children. And our children know it was funny just this week. One of my children was filling out a form and it was like, who would you go to if you you needed help? And they put down my name and my number. And then on a different form, it was like, who would you talk to if you're feeling sad? And they put down my husband's name because
Mhm.
he is much better at like the lighthearted nurturing in terms of let me help you feel good. But he is not good executive skill wise in
Mhm.
terms of like,
Yes,
let me
right.
hunt down all this information and
Mhm.
whatever. And so no matter what that looks like, it doesn't have to just look like who's doing the dishes or whatever. Your children, as they grow, are going to learn that they can trust these different parts of you and they want to be trusted too. That's the
That's
other
right.
thing is like, it's not just about our relationship with the kids and having them do chores. It really plays into the completeness of a family and the roles that we all have. And when I watch movies and I see sometimes like this cliche of a mom who's overwhelmed and overworked
Yep,
and she's doing all the things and she has a job, which by the way, a recent study found that women do, I think it was like 98 hours of work a week. So it's like two and a half jobs, but 70% of us already have a job.
that's right.
And so when we're considering this, right, we need to be very aware of the impression that's coming across and being made and all of these things. And so I don't even remember where my soapbox and tangents started, but I just think it's very important for people for everybody in the family to understand the balance because we cannot have one person doing three and a half jobs and
Right.
somebody else only being the fun parent. Like, yes, my husband
Yes.
is the fun parent, but he also is the parent that like does the dishes and does whatever. And that feels equitable to me because that's what we've set up and communicated together. And the kids know that we feel happy about that. Like, I am not resentful and angry all the time, and neither is he.
Yes,
And that helps
exactly.
them feel more confident in that environment.
Yeah, and your husband is trailblazing in a really powerful way. He is representing the research that says that when men are involved in care, their wellness improves. We see violence go down. We see men's health improving. And unsurprisingly, we see children thriving when men are involved in their care. And as he personifies, men are fabulous, capable, beautiful caregivers. But again, these societal definitions have alienated a lot of the men who want to be involved in this work, but there's so much stigma around it. And the more we talk about how that stigma is impacting all of our wellness in a way that we just can't afford anymore. I've heard you talk about this so much on your podcast. 80% of autoimmune diseases are diagnosed in women, and women are twice as likely to report stress and anxiety and depression diagnoses. And a lot of it is because of the weight of this work and these expectations. And men can do all of this. It's just a matter of valuing the work and including them in the work in a way that society hasn't done before. And this is why I say it's going to have to be a bottom up approach, right? We're not going to suddenly see the government say, We're changing the GDP today, everyone, right? Oh my gosh, suddenly we're shining a light on all of this unpaid work that has never been valued. And guess what? We're valuing it at $1 million. Like that's the ideal state. We're probably not going to see that for a little while, but within our own little bubbles, we can shift how we talk about this work, how we define it as founded in gratitude instead of in dread, how we look at it as opportunities for bonding, how we see it as something that like jolts our own wellness and our own connection to each other. And as you say, it's never too late to start having these conversations. I am a family coach in addition to having written this book, and I'm coaching a couple right now in their 70s. And they're going through this journey because they're looking back and saying, we know more now. We can make a shift. We want to make a shift. We want to live with less resentment and less stress. And we want to feel more connected and feel more founded in gratitude for what we have. And so I so encourage everybody just to like look at the language they use, look at the opportunity for instilling some systems. And again, nothing fancy, but just exactly what you said with like the W kid on the W day, the F kid on the F day, like whatever works for your family, whatever feels like genuine and authentic to how you want to flow through life, like that's what you should be doing. And by the way, if you don't ever want to make your beds, don't do it. Like, who cares? This is not about getting your house to look perfect. This is about centering yourself in your own values and being true to them without any fear of anyone else's expectations, anyone else's judgment. It doesn't matter. As long as you're safe and healthy, right? Whatever you do to please how your family wants to move through this world and how you agree to support each other, that's what you do.
I love so much of that, and especially this image of a 70-year-old couple trying to um, live in gratitude and growth. And I think
Mhm.
that is a wonderful model for all of us. I do want to have a conversation digging in a little bit more to fathers and single parents. I'm thinking of Peter, foster dad Flipper, who was a prior guest on the show, who has at different times up to 6 to 8 children in his house. And he is a single dad. And he is a hero. He is an amazing human, but he is also glorified so much in social media by people who are like, it is amazing to see a man doing quote unquote a woman's work, right?
Right.
Like, how are you accomplishing all of this? And the messaging that is coming across to him sounds different than the foster moms that I follow on social media who share about these
So
things.
interesting.
And so first of all, I like just shout out to any single parent and especially single foster parents. Just my everything goes out to you. Like seriously, email me if you ever need anything because I think you're amazing. I know what it's like to be a foster parent and to have siblings for that child to support them, a partner to support me, partner to support them. Like so that said, setting that aside, there are many people, I don't know the statistics, but I'm going to assume like half of the population are potentially single parents at some point, whether they're going through a divorce or are a single parent in general. And then on top of that, we have 70% of the households that don't have a dedicated homemaker. And so then we're talking about the responsibility of these tasks being a little disrupted. I would love if we could talk a little bit about those disparities, not just in how we can work on them in the house, but like to highlight the fact that the wellness of the person who is doing all of these things, as you mentioned earlier, when we're talking about like a mom taking on all of these things, autoimmune disease, the stress that it causes, like the mental load of a single parent is heavier, so much heavier.
Yeah.
And so, what can we do if we're in that situation to create a little more space in our life? And I love the idea of just don't make your bed then, right? Like there's some
Yeah.
things
Don't make it.
you don't
Right.
need to do.
Right.
It's okay if the laundry like never gets folded and put away, like different things like that. But I think that there are other opportunities that we can maybe highlight for people about how we can support how they can receive support from their community or in different sort of ways so that burden, that stress does not become so overwhelming that they can't enjoy the relationship with the child. And some of the things that we've talked about, I was thinking as we were talking, like it might be hard for someone to hear if they don't have the space and the time to do some of these things because they're stuck in the, well, I have 2 jobs and it's very hard
Yeah,
for me to
for
like make
sure.
time to do some of these things.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple of things. So, first of all, this is where involving children in the creation of seeing the home as a collaborative organization and talking about your family as a team, right? No matter what the shape and size and configuration of your family is, really, it's the language of how you all support one another foundationally from the start. And it's really, as you said, about understanding what we are truly capable of, what our core values are, and what we have got to release. Because it's not worth a compounding stress to have a made bed or folded laundry, and that's not important if it means staying up till past midnight to get it done. Now, that being said, if it feels important to somebody and that's the environment that they need to have to thrive and to feel organized, then it is important. And so then it is important to understand how to achieve that. But it's just the conversations that you have as a family. And again, children, even at a very young age, are incredibly thoughtful and incredibly sensitive and sensible and can participate in a conversation about what feels important to us as a family unit, whatever the structure of that unit is, right? And I do think that children in single parent families really do rise quickly to be strong contributors and to really understand at a deeper level, like the meaning of their role in the flow of that family. But you said community. And this is really the key to so much of what our society needs right now is to understand how to come back together as community and in support of one another. This feels lacking at the moment. An overarching sense of gratitude feels lacking at the moment. And so the more conversations that we can have to shine a light on folks who may need extra support in certain things on a daily or weekly or monthly basis and creating the vehicles for them to receive that right in a way that still feels like safe and like that they're not failing in some way, right? We would never want anyone to think that. We have got to figure out a way to come together more as a community because trying to solve all of these issues like at a household level, right? We need community frameworks, we need social safety nets like to be able to thrive in this way. And then something really interesting that you raised about families where the children may go from household to one household to a different household. Again, ideal state, I recognize, but there is an opportunity because I know a lot of separated and divorced parents, like their agreements really are founded in what's best for the child, right? They center it in like whatever our differences are, what's best for the child. And a lot of times, what can play into the what's best for the child is consistency and continuity in what they contribute to the household. And so different families are going to run differently, especially when new families are created after separation. But having the continuity around how a child develops and what they contribute to their household and what their responsibilities and opportunities are is a great way for them to thrive.
I was raised by divorced my parents divorced when I was 1 years old, and I was raised by both my parents as well as my dad's mother, because when I was younger and he was a single dad, he spent a lot of time at his mom's house getting her support, and what I looked back on when I was younger, I would tell people all the time, I was glad that my parents got a divorce if they weren't gonna be happy together, that, like,
Hmm.
I didn't have any sort of ill will or negativity towards being in that environment. And what I wish would have been different when I got older and I understood that there were different rules at my dad's house and there were different rules at my mom's house and that they didn't talk to each other, it provided opportunity for me to manipulate between the two of them and to create a little bit of chaos and resentment towards, well, I don't have to do that when I am mom's house, or I don't have to do that when I'm a dad. And the one recommendation that I would give, just having been that child myself, obviously, I do not have that circumstance in my own life right now, but from the lived experience as a child, what would have made a huge difference is if even if my parents wouldn't have gotten all three of us to have a conversation together, if like my dad would have sat down and have a conversation and said, I know that you're not responsible for the same kind of things when you're at your mom's as you are here. Because you have two little sisters here, it's very important that you do X, Y, or Z, which is different than you do at home. And it's not because I don't trust you. It's not because you're not mature. It's because X, Y, or Z. And to be able to have that conversation. And
Yeah.
to be fair to my parents, like that's not how we didn't have those kind of conversations in the 80s and early 90s. It's the
Yeah.
fact that like
No.
we just didn't. But I think being able to, even if you can't control from like a co-parenting perspective, but to be able to have that open conversation with your child and say, I recognize that it's not really fair to you that you have two separate rules. And I own that and I'm really sorry. And all I can do is control what is happening with us in this house.
Right.
And I need this and we're going to do it together. And here's why, and all the things that we've talked about. But I think being able to have that open conversation just releases the burden from someone
Yes.
who's like unsure, right? In lieu of not knowing, we assume the worst. And so being able to have that conversation allows some of those walls to be broken down. And maybe the child can advocate or for themselves in those moments, like, well, I do X, Y, or Z at dad's house, and I actually really I feel good about those chores or whatever it is.
Right.
You might not know otherwise. And so
Right.
I would just create that space so that even if you're not having a family meeting like with another partner or whatever, that's your own family meeting, just the two of you. But if you don't create the space for
Yeah.
that conversation, it can't happen.
Yeah. I think that's hugely insightful.
So I always like to leave listeners with something positive and actionable that they can take to be of service out of the podcast. So whether it's for themselves or for others, and I think we've talked about a lot of different things. And if someone is feeling right now like, oh my gosh, my children are 14 and I haven't
Hmm.
done all these things and they're racked with shame and guilt and whatever, what would be a thing that you would tell them you could just do like this one or two or three things, but like do these and feel good about that and don't feel the overwhelm of all the things.
So I think one thing that is so at the heart of all of this that women are learning to become better at and stronger at. And as we improve, the opportunity is for us to teach this to the rest of our family members as well is the creation of boundaries as a vehicle for wellness. And in creating these sort of family systems and having these family conversations is something that is really important is for us to understand how to establish our own boundaries, but also for us to allow our kids, and this is really impactful with tweens and teens too, for us to teach and empower them how to do it for themselves. And for us to talk about what our boundaries are in the home and with the way that our family flows and works together. And for us to talk openly about respecting each other's boundaries. And it's definitely a gift that you give to yourself and that, but it's critical to model this for your kids as well so that they feel respected and like given their own space, as you were just saying, to have what they need. And so the modeling of boundaries for everybody in the family, and obviously we don't just say, oh, my boundary is like, I'm not doing anything. It's a healthy creation of boundaries that are discussed and molded such that we each have our own time for rest, for pursuits of creativity or joy or whatever it is, and that we each have our own time to be trusted to make the contributions that we agreed to make. And beyond that, if there's prickliness or whatever, we have these boundaries to come back to and to say, well, remember I said it was really important for me that I had this time or this day or this space. So I'm just reminding you that we had conversation about that and it is really meaningful to me for this and that reason. I'll be available at this time or on this day, but, like, right now, I have to tell you, I gotta be in my space right now doing accomplishing what I need to be accomplishing, and, like, I know you have the same on your end, and I totally respect it for you. So just in introducing that word and the mechanism of boundary creation to the way that your family, like, lives together, and again, it's not about, like, putting up walls, right? It's about being explicit about what your needs are, when you feel safest, when you feel healthiest, what you need to thrive, and making that really shared and known and respecting that of one another such that we can understand if things fall off, how to pull somebody back in or how to ask for support or whatever it is that we have this sort of understanding as a family of what we need and how we can give it to each other.
I think that's a great place to start, and it can only go from there in terms of once the conversations are started. So I appreciate so much of our conversation. Lori, thank you for being on the show and sharing so much of yourself. Listeners, if you'd like to follow up with Lori or follow her on social or check out her book, you can go to ourhomeourpride.com. And actually, fun fact, through my little stalking, I am interested to see that, Lori, you're also a certified facilitator for Fair Play Method. And I'm assuming a lot of what we've talked about today falls into that. So if
Yes.
you're interested in coaching with Lori or learning more about that, again, Our Home, Our Pride, and we'll put link in the show notes for you. Also put a link in the show notes to your new book, just out, Our Home, The Love, Work, and Heart of Family. Thank you so much for everything. And I I love a conversation where I both like, yes, and oh, I need to learn and implement some of these things into my own life. And our conversation just really inspired a lot today. Lori, is there anything else you want to tell listeners before we say goodbye?
Thank you. I think just to reinforce that this is such a start where you are type of conversation. And no matter what the age of your children, or if it's just you and someone else in your home, or whatever the structure of your family is, there is always an opportunity to connect on elements of this conversation and improve the flow of your family and just feel more connected. Start where you are today. And I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And I will ask that if you enjoyed the show, if you could leave a review saying as much so that other listeners can find us and feel confident in spending their time enjoying some of the podcast. But also, if you just leave a like little star tap, that helps too, or follow and subscribe in whatever you're using. And as always, we appreciate your willingness to be open to growth through your own personal change, but no one is perfect. If anything, as a parent, that is one thing I know for sure. None of us are perfect, but in listening, learning, and unlearning, we can choose to become better versions of ourselves for ourselves, even at 70 years old with some of the people that you're coaching. It is never too late. So, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back again next week.
Thank you.